Welcome to ND and Me, a podcast to share NDers' lived experiences. I'm Richard, an ND coach, mentor, accountability buddy, and business consultant. So, Graham, tell us who Graham is.
So, Graham Summerscales, 54 years old, executive coach and trainer. Recent ADHD diagnosis at the grand old age of 53 in January of this year. This is me.
So, why are you so late in getting diagnosed? What led you to the diagnosis?
So, sadly, a significant time in my life, me and my wife, we split up in August 2020, 1st of August 2020. And she'd sort of stated one or two things that she wasn't too happy with. And at that time, I obviously didn't realise that this was probably connected to ADHD. And my diagnosis came about after, well, I suppose every ADHDer's Achilles heel, TikTok, or was it a YouTube feed? I can't remember now. Probably a YouTube feed that came up on my phone, and I watched Jessica McCabe
From How to ADHD.
From How to ADHD, yeah. And I watched her TED Talks, Failing at Normal, which was quite an eye-opener and quite an emotive watch, actually. And I just thought, she's talking about me, is this woman. She's talking about all the behaviours that she's talking about in herself. She's talking about me. And I'd never, ever realised at that point. So this was in September last year. I contacted my doctor, stated a case for feeling that I had ADHD and would like an assessment. She basically said, yeah, it sounds like you have got typical symptoms of ADHD. I'll write you a referral note. Wrote me a referral note to the NHS psychiatry unit, and nothing happened. So chased it up a month later. Now you're still in the system. No feedback on how long this process was going to take. Got to mid-December, still nothing. So I actually found out through some kind of social media that in certain NHS districts, I think what are they called? Districts? Are they called districts? So, anyway, certain NHS throughout the country, they're all sort of got their own patch, haven't they? And within my area where I live, there was quoting up to 5 years for a diagnosis for ADHD, which is absolutely ridiculous. So me being me, resilient, resourceful, started doing lots of research on where I could get a diagnosis, and phoned a number of people up, got some costings, and I found, and you could probably put this in the notes of your feed when you put this live, Richard. I found this woman called Sushi Dobinson, and she's based in Hull. She actually works for the NHS. She's got an organisation called Spectrum Diagnosis. And I had my diagnosis with Sushi. She charged me the princely sum of £350, which is really cheap, really cheap. Now that's not with the support for medication, because I've decided to go down the clean route, and I followed Joe Pack weekly on his tips. He's great as Joe, so I'm like Joe, and I try and manage my condition as naturally as possible. So I didn't take that route. I just got the diagnosis, and obviously since January the 12th, which is a really poignant date because that was my dad's birthday as well. I got my diagnosis on the 12th of January, and since that day, I've been learning so much about myself, so much about what is ADHD and what is Graham. And it's been quite a journey to this point, and obviously this journey has obviously led me to meet people like yourself, Richard. So I've generated so many new connections just by having ADHD, and what I found is by connecting with these types of with people like yourself, Richard, is we've got this instant connection, we've got this instant understanding, and this instant respect of how our conditions affect our lives, which has been great. And yeah, it sounds quite heartwarming, and but it's great to be part of this community that. And what it gives me is a sense of feeling of I'm not on my own. I know that I can pick up a number of phones now to a number of people and pick up and have a chat and know that I can share my feelings and thoughts and without judgment. And because ultimately we all just want to thrive and be the best versions of ourselves. But to the neurotypical world, that's not always that easy.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Having a diagnosis to explain who you are, not define who you are, which I think is a useful distinction. So talk to me about what Graham does for a living. Yeah, how is that impacted or supported or eroded by your neurodiverse conditions?
Well, it's quite difficult to sort of explain the circumstance I'm in without. I don't want to point fingers at significant others that were in my life, but we had a really, really successful business together. Let's just say that one person has sailed off into the sunset with the client base, and the other one's been left behind with nothing. So I've been obviously working damned hard, networking, getting busy, and making new connections and trying to find new business opportunities. So I'm an executive coach, I'm a trainer, and I also collaborate with a friend of mine who's qualified HR consultant, who, funnily enough, is on the spectrum like us. He's got dyslexia, so we're a right pair. But we work together and we build teams. I coach individuals, coach teams. We recruit people. We manage restructures and redundancies. We do anything to do with the life cycle of an employee. That's what we do. So if you're out there and you need some support, and maybe you're an ADHD business owner, we can help. We can help put the right bums on seats on your bus for your business, making sure that those people are fit for purpose and they're being the best versions of themselves for your organisation. Now,
I once posited that phrasing, the best version of themselves, to Catherine, my former boss and previous podcast guest. And she said, the best version of me is sitting on a beach with a cocktail. So nobody wants to hire the best version of me.
Well, yeah. Yeah, well, the best version of me is probably on the golf course, but I do love what I do, and I do love developing and helping people become better at what they do. Problem managers, young managers that's going into the world of work and not had the opportunities that I had when I was their age, and getting them fit for purpose, and helping them meet their goals for their careers, helping them to be successful. So, there's a great drive behind that of helping others. And I don't know whether that's a common ADHD trait. I don't know whether you share that, Richard, but I always like to help other people. And I guess that's about that acceptance and that gratification that us ADHDers crave for.
Well, I'm a... how to frame this? I don't want to say I'm a people pleaser because I don't please many people. So, yeah, Marmite, that's a people pleaser. Yeah, for those people who like Marmite.
Yeah.
But I think there is an intrinsic. Yeah, I feel value when I'm valuable to others. So today I was at a charity that I support that house older people of meager means. I'm a supporter with Neurodiversity in Business, and my local scout group, and a non-profit association, and there's probably 5 or 6 non-profit and charitable organizations that I spend my time with. But there's definitely something there about wanting to help people. I remember in an interview once they were like, well, why do you want this job? And I was like, well, because I've always helped people. I've worked in social housing. I've worked in HR consulting. I've worked in early detection of cancer. Well, why am I doing those types of roles? Well, because I want to help people. So I don't know if that's an ADHD trait or just a trait of somebody who wants to give back to the community. But humans are also beasts of burden. We need a level of purpose to drive us. If we can't even help ourselves, then we're in a pretty sorry state. And if we can help other people, then that's got to be a good thing. So, since your diagnosis, have you had any of those like light bulb moments of, oh, that thing that happened to me when I was 12, that was because of this, or it has been a relatively flat process of coming to understand where you are?
So, what I can't remember what we were talking about before. The lead up to that, because that had my thought, and this is typical of an ADHD brain for the listeners. You lose the thread and forget because your brain's moved on to the next thing.
So we were having a conversation about the work that you and Matt are doing, with All About Change, and then the change of tack into the realization that you've now got the diagnosis. Has that helped you explain some behaviors or events in your past that you can now pin and say, hang on a second, I know that I did that thing because, or not?
Yeah, but there was something that you were discussing about. Oh, it's about helping other people.
Yep. I don't know how far back you lost me.
Yeah, it was about helping other people. But the listeners who have got ADHD, they'll get this conversation, won't they? They'll certainly get it. So it was about helping other people. And for me, that helping other people, I realised this is what I've realised following my diagnosis is the reason I like to help other people. It's that it ticks that box of not going to the rejection sensitivity because you're accepted by your opposite. You've helped them, you're getting gratification for that. So that sense of, not being picked as part of the school football team, for example, you don't feel that disappointment and that need of not belonging to a group. So I suppose for me that is my remedy to prevent the rejection. Is if I help somebody, I know that I've been accepted, and I know that I've obviously been wanted for what they wanted me to do.
Yeah,
so, that's been a massive realization for me.
Yeah, in a way, it's people pleasing to build the relationship to prevent you being rejected.
Yeah. But we don't. But as ADHDers, we don't have to do that, do we? When we talk to a fellow, we don't tend to have to do that because there's just an instant understanding of people's condition and how it presents itself. And I know that no one ADHD is identical to the next because it does present itself in sort of loads of different ways. and we're all human beings and we're all different anyway.
Mm.
So, you know, for some ADHDers, the rejection sensitivity might not be that much of an issue. I know it's for me. So yeah, but the neurotypical world, you know, this is where I wrestle with it, because we've got to fit into a neurotypical world. Why can't the neurotypical world fit into our world?
Well, and yeah, that goes back to I think it was Jess that I first heard it from, at How to ADHD, talking about workplace accommodations. Yeah, but workplace accommodations work even if you're neurotypical, because actually they're just an easier way or a better way of doing really laborious, hard to manage things.
Yeah.
And, you know, things that are complex are even more complex if you have, you know, cognitive dysfunction or executive disorder or whatever else there is going on.
Yeah, I mean, I do think that the organisations are, you know, their ears are picking up. Obviously, neurodiversity in business are obviously a bit of a flag bearer for that, and other organisations, ADHD Foundation, you know, there's all sorts of ADHD organisations that's sort of waving the flag and making the noise. And there's a lot of organisations that are, let's say, trying, because they're not there yet.
Yeah,
they're not. Yeah, and this is a lived experience as an example I'm going to share. Recently, I went for some associate work with a well-known high street brand, and their recruitment process, the information that they sent me was long, in the smallest font ever. And it was just a link onto that came in my calendar, and there were a number of different actions that I had to take and prepare for. And how it presents itself in me is reading is really, really difficult. It's like noodles on a page or worms that wiggle. My son described it that way, because he's just about going through the stage of getting a diagnosis, and he struggles to read and absorb that information and process that information in the moment. He said I return about 10% of it in the initial, and I've got to go back to it, and that's very much how it goes for me. And they'd sent me this list of activities and tasks and things like that, and I just couldn't. It was overwhelming. I couldn't read it, and I had a bit of a feedback session with them today, and I give them that feedback, and I said, well, how can you? I says, how can you be inclusive when you're not accommodating somebody who's got that difficulty? When I'd clearly made you aware that I had ADHD on one of the previous rounds. And he says, we weren't aware of that. I said, well, you know, perhaps it could be on audio, perhaps you could send it in a different format, and perhaps you could phone up with a phone call after, just to make sure that it's been understood. So organisations, yeah, I get that they're trying to do the best, and they're trying to do, you know, we are inclusive and all this kind of thing, but they're not there yet. They're not there yet. And I think further on down the line, it might be better for our children and our children's children, but it's still not there yet. And I think organisations, corporates, etc., they've just got a long, long way to go.
No, I definitely think that there is a level of wanting to be in the in group of, you know, we're supportive of diversity. You know, we've signed up to all of these foundations and charities to prove our commitment to.
Yeah.
But how much of that is actual commitment? Or is it, well, you know, we donated a couple of £1,000 to a charity, so we've got their logo on our page. So now, you know, Stonewall or Living Wage Foundation or Investors in People, how many of those types of accreditations actually mean something?
It's the old adage, isn't it? It's actions speak louder than words. Saying versus doing are two different things. You know, you tend to judge people on their actions, don't you? Not on what they say.
Well, I'm going back to the Batman quote, and regular listeners will know that I referred to this Batman quote in a previous episode. But it was, it isn't what you say, but your actions that define you.
Yeah.
And, I'm a big advocate of, walking the talk. If you're truly saying that you're inclusive, you're a liar, because you can't be fully inclusive.
No.
You just can't be. If you're heterosexual, you are already not inclusive because you've just shunned half the population. So there is nearly always a line of who is or isn't going to be included in something, and that's part of the conversation for an organization, is to say, well, we can't be wholly inclusive, but what we're going to focus on are these types of things. So, organizations aren't inclusive on age. Organizations aren't inclusive. Well, age is probably the only thing that they aren't inclusive on. But then when you get into the diversity or the disability space, so many of the current benchmarks for disable aware, or I can't remember the term, but basically there's a standard for supporting disabled folk. Yeah, but the standard is written for physical disabilities. Do you have level access? Do you have handrails? Do you have braille? Rather than, do you create an atmosphere where people can be their best? Is that through assistive technologies? Is that through a clean environment that isn't cluttered with stuff? And I think that there is definitely a conversation about how mature organizations are in their journey of being inclusive for neurodiversity. So, I've seen NICE as an acronym for a certification standard for ND folk. You've got Neurodiversity Smart from Lexic. Neurodiversity in Business have just launched their maturity index. So there's plenty of ways out there where organizations can measure how inclusive they're being. But even the answers to those questions could be a tick box to try and meet the standard rather than truly being inclusive.
Yeah. I mean, I've just had some success with access to work for my business, and wow, what they're providing me will be a game changer for me, for sure. But let's just talk about the process of getting to where it is and what I've received now. So the paperwork to reclaim the funding that they're providing me with, it's not neurodivergent friendly. It doesn't suit my disability. Well, it's not a disability, is it? It's a
not a
disability.
A difference in ability.
It's a difference in ability. Yeah, it's a difference in ability. It doesn't suit that. There's reams and reams of paperwork, and as I'm sat here talking to you, Richard, I'm looking at the piles of paperwork that the Department of Work and Pensions has generated for me, and that I've got to generate for them to prove that the right person's obviously putting the right price on and delivering the service that they've prepared for. Now, it's great that we've got this opportunity to thrive through this, but however, to get there, to jump through all these hoops, it's just it's overwhelming for somebody who's got ADHD.
Yeah, I had a very recent conversation with, who was it? It was either the DWP or the HMRC. And the person I was speaking with was like, okay, well, I've got 10 tabs open, each with a different version of your information on, and I need to copy your information across all of these 10 things. So I know that the right information is in the right place. Cool. Yeah. So I'm going to ask you some questions. And so on the first tab, I answered the questions. On tab 6, I'm like, I've already answered these questions. It's like, because I'm doing some further education stuff, and they're talking about funding and tax breaks and all that jazz.
And it's overwhelming. It's absolutely overwhelming. So, they've got 10 tabs open. I generally have about 19, 20 on my laptop.
Well, I get in the habit of closing them because I'm used to running on really old computers that don't like more than 10 tabs open.
Ah, right.
But no, it's so true that, you know, control click is your friend.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
But the
opening the
world has
spider diagram of stuff.
why should we have to fit into that world? Why can't they fit into ours? You know, this is my bugbear. And you know that this thought about that role reversal has come into my head today and only today. And I thought, I'm going to talk to Richard. And I'm going to talk about that because it's important that, you know, we've got to meet the goal together.
Yeah, and for me, I think it's more helpful to have we language than us and them language.
Yeah.
And you know, getting into that conversation of diffability versus disability.
Yeah.
A very quick anecdote. You know, I've just come out of a committee meeting for an Arms House association that I support. And one of my co-trustees was talking to me about the work that I do in neurodiversity. And she was like, you know, Richard, since like last month when you said that word, I hadn't heard it before that. And since then, I've heard it 3 times a week, every week since. Is that like a really like new word? I was like, well, not really. And, you know, she's got daughters or nieces that are neurodivergent. And they've been having trouble at school, and they chose their A levels to make sure that they didn't have to write the written word. Yeah, so they did like art and maths, so they could get and they ended up with A's. Fantastic. But it was quite funny seeing somebody who had relatives who are neurodivergent talk the way they talked. I was like, you know, it's going to be really hard for them to get on in life because of, you know, the challenges that they face. I was like, well, you have to also remember that Elon Musk is neurodiverse, that Richard Branson is neurodiverse. So just because we have a label doesn't mean that we are the dregs of society at the bottom of the barrel.
Yeah.
Actually, you know, the way that our brains operate is on a different scale to our cognitive ability. So, you know, there are geniuses who are autistic or have ADHD or are dyslexic. And there's people who are perfectly neurotypical that aren't cognitively smart. So just because you see that 20% of autistic people don't have jobs, you assume that all autistic people are that 20%.
Yeah.
Well, no. Yeah, there are plenty of people who pass for normal because they've been clever enough to find, you know, their workarounds, you know, put on a mask to live and thrive in the neurotypical world. But, you know, is there a way that we could make processes simpler or more defined or easier to understand? And would that help people who are also neurodiverse? Absolutely.
I mean, you know, why not ask the question right from the off? And I'm talking about the situation that I've been in earlier on today, the process that I've just been through. You know, why are we not standardizing this for everybody, that it's the instructions are available from an audio point of view, or they're available in Braille or whatever, they're available for whichever minority group are struggling. Why are they just not available as a standard?
Yeah,
because then you are being inclusive. Then you are being inclusive.
Well, yeah, my part of my work and my old work was in human resources and you know, diversity, protected characteristics, HR stuff. And we were doing a piece of research and we were falling over the term BAME, because this was a year ago when it fell out of fashion to use the word BAME, because the government had used the word BAME to describe Black and Bangladeshi and Asian subcontinent folk and how COVID was impacting them. I said BAME people are more likely to be ill with COVID. Well, the problem is that Black, Asian, and minority ethnic is far wider than just the three communities that they wanted to highlight. So actually, South Korean, Japanese, some Indian communities, some North African communities were better than Caucasian folk. But because they had used the term BAME, they were slapped in the same puddle as everybody else. So, well, where do we get from there? Well, what we should do, this is government guidance, what we should do is we should list every collective noun for people in the group that we're associating ourselves with. Okay, so let's say that we do a survey of 10,000 people. In the UK, about 14% of them are non-British. Okay, so that's 1,400 people. Okay, well, if those 1,400 respondents were from 700 different ethnic origins, you're saying that within the report, we should list 700 ethnic origins or have a collective noun out of minority ethnics or ethnic minorities. Or if the prominent two of those 700 are Black and Asian, Black, Asian, and minority minorities. So going back to your point of, well, you can be really inclusive if you have text, braille, audio, foreign languages,
video. At
what point on the language front do you then say, okay, that's enough? Do you have English, Spanish, Mandarin? Because that's like 3 of the world's 6 billion people. Is that enough? So yeah, I still think that there is a line on inclusion that somebody needs to draw somewhere, because you can't be wholly inclusive. But trying to profess that you are wholly inclusive is, a moral fallacy. Yeah.
When
well,
you're not.
Especially when you actually aren't even a little bit inclusive.
Yeah, when you're not. It's challenging, isn't it? We live in this challenging world where we've seemingly got to do the hard work to fit in.
Yeah.
And ultimately all we want to be is as good as the next man, or be seen as good as the next man.
Well, and then you turn around to that.
Yeah, but that said, up to being 53 and not knowing that I had ADHD, I've had a lot of real great successes in my life.
Yeah, absolutely. And for me, that goes back to a question of, no, I've gone and lost it, haven't I? No. You see, ADHD brains are real, guys.
Yeah, they are. Yeah, but going back to what I was saying, is like judge Graham for being Graham. Don't judge Graham for being Graham with ADHD. Judge Graham for
it's that autistic bloke Richard. No, it's Richard. He just happens to be on the spectrum.
Yeah.
No, my thought was going back to the form filling out.
Yeah.
We don't want 12 pages worth of information as a guidance document to then go and fill in a form. Why don't you put the guidance for this question next door to this bloody question, so I know what I need to answer because it's right there in front of me? And if you asked a neurotypical guy, he might say the same thing. Would be really helpful if, please answer this question. What we're looking for as an answer to this question is ... Brilliant. Write your answer. Or please answer this question. Go see the guidance, page 12 of the guidance notes. Nobody's going to read the guidance notes.
Yeah.
And I was speaking on LinkedIn with another ADHD coach who lives 4 miles away from me, because she's undertaking some qualifications, and she was like, I've written the first essay in 20 years. How? I just, it literally took her a week and a half to write an essay. And I was like, well,
Yeah.
what I do is I get my salient talking points, and then I write a couple of 100 words for each of those talking points, because it's much easier for me to write half a page on a topic than write a 6,000 word essay.
Yeah.
And it's just looking at how people are asking questions to see, well, is there a better way of asking that question, or a better format in how you're asking that question, so it's easier for everybody to be able to answer it, rather than go, here's a question and here's 6 blank sheets of paper. No wonder I failed my law exams.
At least you had a go.
Well, yeah, and then you get the conversation about accommodations. Oh, well, you're dyslexic, you've got ADHD. Oh, we'll give you more time. I don't need more time. What I actually need is for you to turn around to me and say, we've got 45 minutes per question. What you need to do is look at this question and answer it in 45 minutes. Bam. And then you do that 5 times, and that's your exam. Rather than going, oh, here's 5 hours, and then you get left on question 1 because you're too busy thinking about what the hell you're going to write in question 1.
Yeah, it's a struggle, isn't it? It's a struggle, but we don't want to be defined by it. And a significant other at one point, when that person had found out about my diagnosis, said it's just an excuse.
Yeah. And
well,
no,
it's not an excuse. No, it's not an excuse.
Yeah, I completely feel for you. My other half is most definitely neurodivergent, but refuses to get a diagnosis because she's got enough wrong with her and doesn't want to add to the list. But I definitely think that there are folk in the world who live by some level of blame, and see explanations as excuses. I'm sorry I'm late, I was caught in traffic. Now, I couldn't control the traffic that I was in, but it meant that I was late. We should have left earlier. Well, I left 2 hours early, and there was an accident and the road shut. If everything had gone well, I would have been here an hour early. Okay, so are you saying that I should set my benchmark to always be able to deliver, even if something unexpected happened? Yeah. Well, I don't have the time to do that. Don't give me excuses. Well, I'm not giving you an excuse. I'm giving you a reason. But if you're seeing it as an excuse, then that's a perceptual problem that you need to manage, because I've explained to you why the thing happened the way it did. At the moment, I'm doing Northumbria University's course on restorative just cultures, which is all about what went wrong and who did wrong. Okay, well, what happened when this person died in hospital? Well, what happened was that the machine was turned off. Why was the machine turned off? Well, because there's a known fault on that ward that the machines beep when they shouldn't beep. So the nurses just turn the alarms off. Okay, but then when the alarm was meant to go off because the patient was dying, nobody attended the patient. Well, yeah, because the alarms were off. Okay, well, it's the nurse's fault for turning off the alarm. Is it? Or is it the machine's fault for being faulty? There's an explanation of a series of unfortunate events that led to something bad happening, and having the conversation about all of those things that add together, all those slices of the pie that make the pie, all of the ingredients of the soup that make it tasty. You can't suddenly wash it away and say, well, they're just excuses, it's your fault. Well, some things aren't our fault. We didn't choose to be neurodivergent. We don't choose to be arseholes. Okay, I'm not calling you an arsehole. I'm an arsehole.
That's quite a good description. Some people have probably called me that in the past.
Yeah. So a lot of people like Vegemite and Marmite, and a lot of people don't. But it doesn't mean that I'm bad just because you don't like me.
Got a significant other in my life, and she's really supportive, and supports me in every which way she can. And the good thing about what she does is she makes me do it. I can't, I can't dodge the curveball. It's just, I've got to just front up and get a job done, which is great because I'm developing even at my ripe old age. But I just hope that things like this podcast, I've been on a number of podcasts now, Joe Pax, Natasha Hicklins. I've been on one with a friend of mine who's got a business called Within You, Sports Mental Health. He's just doing some great stuff around supporting mental health with football clubs at the moment. So I've been on a number of different podcasts, and if my story and what we discuss around my condition and how it presents itself and my lived experiences helps younger people that may be too frightened of even sharing and they're still masking their condition. And there's a lot of people out there that are. And if I can help that, help those people thrive and have a better life, great. Happy days. That's my sole purpose of being involved in podcasts and sort of shouting about neurodiversity and helping people thrive and generate positive lives ultimately.
No,
I've got my son. I mean, in my family alone, we think my son's got it. I know that my mother had it. And that's been the realization. Going back to your initial question, realised that my mum, bless her soul, that she had it. My niece, it looks like she's got it as well. And my cousin's daughter, she's just had a diagnosis and she's got it as well. So it's a bit of a pandemic in the Summerscales family. So yeah, and if anybody's out there who understands what that feels like, and I'm sure there'll be loads of families out there that's got a number of different family members also sharing the condition or other conditions on top of that, you'll understand the challenges that goes with it. And hats off to you all, and just be the best versions of yourself and live the best life you can. That's all I would say. Because there's support out there, there's help out there, and there's no reason why you cannot thrive and be successful in your life. There's no reason why not. But you've got to keep moving forward ultimately.
Yeah, absolutely.
Moving forward.
It's all about change.
Yeah, it is all about change. It certainly has been for me this last 3 years. So yeah, I think that's the reason why I rebranded the business and called it All About Change. So yeah. So appreciate your invite, Richard, and thanks for letting me come on your podcast today.
No, it is my pleasure.